Hi there, my name is Toby, and I've spent most of my life training internal and external martial arts, and now I'm doing training in my own particular way. I'm trying to find a natural body, a neutral body, and move and flow from there. And today I'm working on the samurai sword. And the samurai sword is a two-handed sword, and it's quite heavy, so it requires a good body structure. I've got to hold my bone structure together nicely so that there's strength in my body, and I can feel the weight and the center of gravity of the sword as well as the center of gravity of my body. And I'm using what I call elastic power. I'm springing in the body. There's a spring, and I'm using this spring to create waves and whips through the body into the sword. And a lot of this you can see using the sword. The best analogy is a golf club. When you swing a golf club, you're creating a very powerful whip right down to the end of the club, and that hits the golf ball. And the same thing with a samurai sword. I've got to create a very powerful arc, a whip, and that will create a great speed right at the tip of the sword. So you can strike with this sword in many different ways. You need structure and you need flow. And here you can see the similarity between a golf swing to a side angle cut. And the blade, of course, is bent at a slight angle. This is on purpose. This is the optimum angle for efficiency. And a long time ago I contemplated the most efficient weapons to train in martial arts. And this, of course, has got to be one of them. The samurai sword is the greatest sword ever created. I've seen a video where they shoot a gun, a bullet at the blade, and the blade will split that bullet in two. That's how good the sword was. And if you compare this to yesterday's video, the Tai Chi sword is lighter, lightweight and straight, so you can use it in both directions and hold it in one hand. This sword is heavier and it's got one side sharp, one side blunt, but you can use both sides still, block with the blunt side and strike with the sharp side. But the weapons that I decided to use as the most important weapons to give you an overall training in weapons, one of them is this, the samurai sword. The other one is the straight sword, the Tai Chi sword, and the other one is the stick, the long stick. So I'm going to do a video about that soon. But training these three weapons give you a good overall picture of all weapons, and you can do everything from there. Even a short stick. Well, the short stick is so similar to the Tai Chi sword, a straight weapon held in one hand. So these three weapons will give you a good basis for all types of weapons. And I've also developed protocols for using these weapons. I'm using a particular protocol to fight with this sword. My right hand is at the top and my left hand is at the bottom. I'm using them both, but I will also use one hand. But when I use one hand, I'll use the left hand at the bottom and I'll use the right hand at the top. So again, I'm ambidextrous, and if you go and look at my other video, I'll leave the link below, to the Tai Chi sword, I'll swap hands. So you've got to be able to use both hands equally, and this is one thing that's neglected in traditional martial arts. It's always one-sided. You've got to do both sides. You've got to be free. Both hands have got to be able to use the weapon. And here you can see my shoulders are up and back, so I'm holding a strong structure. This is because the sword is quite heavy, and this is a particularly heavy one. It's quite sharp, not sharp enough. It's still only a training sword, but it still could do some serious damage fighting with this sword I'm using. And the thing is, I'm unifying my body and the sword together. Once I can feel both centers of gravity, my own body and the sword, then I've got to find the midpoint, the connection between these two centers of gravity. And you'll see a lot of counterbalancing. I move my body to counterbalance the motion of the sword. I'm always trying to pivot around the center of gravity, this unified center of gravity. This is the most efficient way of using this sword. I've got to try and make this heavy sword weightless. It's got to be lightweight, and the only way I can do that is keep moving and keep moving around the center of gravity, my combined center of gravity. And this gives the illusion that the sword is weightless, because you're never actually holding it under its weight. You're always just pivoting it, rotating it around its center of gravity, making it feel weightless. And here you can see in slow motion the golf swing cutting. So I've got to pull the blade back inwards at the end. I've got to create an arc, a spiraling arc. The arc comes inwards, and that creates an apex of a whip. And there's a particular point where the blade is going to reach, the tip of the blade will reach its maximum acceleration. And if you can do that, you don't even need to penetrate. You just reach with the tiniest tip of the blade and you do quite a devastating cut. But of course you can cut close as well, hack at this like an axe, which I was doing earlier on, but that requires great strength in the joints. You see, I've got to work the tendons and the joints to control my body. I'm using structural isometrics and basing my structure on a neutral stance. Again, I'll leave the links below to learn more about that. And from this neutral, natural body position, it's the most efficient for holding strength in my bone structure and it's the midpoint of all movement. I can move around freely from this structure nice and easy. And there's a stabbing motion. Again, you can see the whole body structure held together, and I'm pulsing that whole body structure. And that little final flick at the end was just flicking off the blood at the end of the fight. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little video. I'll leave the link to the Tai Chi sword, check that out as well, and soon I'll make a video in comparison of these two swords. Okay, thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you in one of these other videos.